Today, we're diving into one of the most beautiful and fundamental ideas in all of nature, ecosystem equilibrium. You can think of it like an intricate web of life, a delicate dance where every single player, no matter how small, has an absolutely crucial role to play. And that brings us to the one big question that's going to guide us through this entire explainer. What really happens when you pull just one single thread from that web? As we're about to see, the answer shows us just how fragile that beautiful balance can be. So before we can understand how this web can unravel, we first have to see how it's woven together in the first place. Let's start with the basics, the chains and connections that give every ecosystem its strength. Okay, at its most simple, energy in an ecosystem flows in a nice, straight line. We call it a food chain. It all starts with a producer, right? Something like grass, which captures the sun's energy. Then a butterfly eats the grass, a spider eats the butterfly, a sparrow eats the sparrow, and finally, a hawk swoops down and eats the sparrow. See? It's a direct, simple path for energy to travel. But of course, nature is rarely that neat and tidy. It's not really a single chain, it's more of a food web, where tons of different chains all intersect and overlap. This means an animal can be on different feeding levels at the same time. A snake that eats a mouse is a secondary consumer. But if that same snake eats a lizard that ate insects, boom, it's suddenly a tertiary consumer. This complexity, this messiness, is actually the secret to a strong ecosystem. And here's exactly why that complexity is so important. In a really simple system, if one species gets wiped out, its predators could literally starve. The whole thing is brittle. But in a complex web, predators have options. If all the mice disappear, a hawk can just switch to eating snakes or birds. That variety creates resilience. The more threads you have in the web, the harder it is to break. So what's the logic behind this whole web structure? Well, it all comes down to a universal rule about energy. There's a really basic reason why there are always more plants than herbivores and way more herbivores than predators. It's a law of physics, really, and it forces nature into a very specific shape. The first way we see this pyramid shape is just in pure numbers. Think about it. An ecosystem might have over 1 million individual plants, right? But all that can only support maybe a couple 100,000 insects, which in turn might only support 90,000 predators. The population just plummets at each level you go up. Now let's look at it another way. Biomass. That's just the total weight of all the living things at each level. So if you could somehow put all the producers on a giant scale, their combined weight would be massive. But the total weight of the animals they support, it's tiny in comparison, and the weight of the top predators is even smaller. The pyramid shape holds up. But here is the most important pyramid of all. This is the one that explains everything else, energy. And just look at that drop-off. It is absolutely staggering. The producers might hold over 20,000 units of energy, but less than 4,000 of that actually makes it to the next level. And then less than 400 make it to the level after that. So this raises a huge question. Where did all that missing energy go? Well, the answer is that passing energy on is incredibly inefficient. It's a one-way street, flowing up from the bottom, and at every single step, roughly 90% of the energy gets used for just living. Moving, breathing, keeping warm, or it's just lost as heat. Only about 10% of that energy is stored as body mass, ready to be eaten by the next predator. This one simple rule dictates the entire structure of almost every ecosystem on the planet. So, we've got the structure. Now, let's talk about the movement. A healthy ecosystem isn't just sitting still. It's a living, breathing system with a natural rhythm, a constant dance between predator and prey that keeps the whole system in check. And this is probably the most famous example of that rhythm you'll ever see. The cycle of the snowshoe hare and the lynx. Their populations are locked in this endless rise and fall. First, the hare population explodes. With so much food around, the lynx population booms right behind them. But more predators means the hare population crashes. And then, with their food source gone, the lynx numbers inevitably crash too, starting the whole cycle over again. This self-correction is like the immune system for a healthy ecosystem. Just imagine a sudden boom in rabbits. Right away, the web starts to push back from two directions. From below, the grass starts to disappear from being overeaten. And from above, predators have more food, so their numbers grow. This pressure from both ends squeezes the rabbit population back down to a normal level, and just like that, balance is restored. But what happens when a change isn't just a temporary little blip? What happens when a force is so big that this natural rhythm can't fix it? This is where we get back to our original question. What happens when you pull a thread from the web for good?
The forces that can permanently shatter this balance usually come in two flavors. First, you've got your sudden, catastrophic natural disasters. Think a volcanic eruption or a massive flood. And then you have human activities. These are often slower, more persistent, and way more widespread. Things like deforestation, pollution, and just relentless urbanization. The Kaibab Plateau in Arizona is a stark and pretty tragic lesson in what happens. Back in 1905, people decided to help the local deer by getting rid of their only natural predator, the wolf. And what was the result? Well, the deer population exploded, soaring to 100,000. They eat the land completely bare, destroying their own food source. And then came the inevitable crash. Tens of thousands of deer starved to death. By trying to remove one single unwanted thread, humans unraveled the entire ecosystem. That story is such a powerful warning of what happens when we interfere. And if our activity is the main thing knocking ecosystems out of balance today, then we also have the main responsibility and the ability to start mending that web. I mean, the scale of our impact is now global. Our cities and our roads slice right through habitats, cutting off populations. Deforestation triggers massive soil erosion. Pollution from farms and factories creates dead zones in our rivers and oceans. And all the while, air pollution is changing the entire global climate, literally rewriting the rules of survival for every living thing on the planet. But there is hope in the actions that are being taken. We are protecting huge landscapes as national parks. We are actively working to restore damaged forests and bring rivers back to life. We're even finding clever ways to weave nature back into our cities with things like green spaces. And, crucially, we're learning to look before we leap, using impact assessments and international agreements to protect what we have left. These are the threads of repair, our attempts to weave that web back together. So what's the ultimate takeaway here? It's this. Everything is connected. The fate of a single species in a remote forest can have ripple effects that reach every one of us. Because when we talk about preserving biodiversity, we're not just talking about saving plants and animals for their own sake. We are, in the most literal sense possible, talking about preserving ourselves.